Gary, thank you for letting us see your collection here. And so let me start off with what was your first radio?
My first radio was this Zenith 35 APX, which was released in 1928-29. You know, in those days, new models were introduced to coincide with the Christmas buying season, so that's why 28-29 for this set.
Okay, very cool. And Gary, while we're on the subject, when did you join MAARC and actually start? Now you had this radio, that was your first one you got, and that was before you joined MAARC, is that right?
Yes, I believe that I joined MAARC probably in 1988 or 87.
Okay, and that was at that convention, that joint convention?
The joint convention of MAARC and the Antique Radio Club, ARCA.
And actually, I told you that we have pictures from that on our website. You might be in those pictures. I don't know. I might not recognize you.
Probably not. I was a little younger then.
So Gary, show us your first radio here. What do we got? It's got doors on it, and
yes, it's the 1927-28 Zenith. It's a tuned radio frequency or TRF set. And many console radios from this period did have doors on them so that it looked like a piece of furniture when the radio was not being used.
Mm-hmm.
It's a single dial tuning.
Well, that was pretty advanced for a TRF set, was it?
In those days, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it has this door here, which conceals an automatic tuning unit, as it was called.
Huh.
It's mechanically, the tuning unit is mechanically connected to the radio. So when you press one of these levers, as you can see the dial, it mechanically moves the dial to the preset position.
Ah, so what stations are on there right now? Are they local stations?
No, these are stations from the Boston area.
Ah, okay.
This radio initially, I bought it locally at an antique store, and the antique store got it from a home on Brookline Avenue in Boston, which I understand is kind of a Tony neighborhood.
What's next, Gary?
I'd like to show you this Sodion. Sodion receivers were made by Connecticut Telephone and Electric Company, again, Meriden, Connecticut.
Okay.
And they're unique in that the tube they use is unique. There was a guy, an engineer at Connecticut, that was attempting to make tubes. He tried for some time to make tubes that did not conflict with the deforest patents.
Mm-hmm.
So he came up with some unique designs, and I don't want to pull this one out, but I'll show you this one. They're frosted. This is a Sodion D21, that's an S21. And inside it, if you hold it up to the light, you can see there's another tube inside.
Here we see it, yep.
And the anode, or the plate of the tube inside, is on the outside of that inner tube. And the patent, which you can see online, explained that conduction was through electrolytic conduction, and I'm not sure what that means, but the radios do work, but not very well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe as well as you would expect something like that too. Norden Houck
C10, okay.
Norden Houck was in Philadelphia. By the way, this radio won the Best in Show and the Historical Merit Award at the 1922 Radioactivity Old Equipment Contest. It's a 10-tube receiver, It was designed by Charles Lutz and was fully described in his book, Modern Radio Reception, published in 1925. So it's modern radio as it was in 1925. It's a super heterodyne set. And as some of you know, the super heterodyne patent belonged to RCA, since that's where Edwin H. Armstrong, the inventor of the superhet, worked.
Mm-hmm.
And RCA filed a lawsuit forbidding any manufacturer from manufacturing and selling super heterodyne sets. However, there was a company called EIS, Experimenters Information Service, that published construction drawings and lists of parts, so that the experimenter could go to his radio store and buy the parts to build a set. For some reason, Norton Houck in Philadelphia was allowed to manufacture and sell these complete sets, and it isn't known why he was allowed to do that. Alan Douglas, in his book, Radio Manufacturers of the 1920s, opines that because RCA was in New York and Norton Houck was in Philadelphia, RCA didn't want to get involved, but to me that's somewhat of a specious explanation. Here we have a Zenith Super 7. These sets came out in 1924. The same chassis was used in 3 other models, the Super 8, 9, and 10, which were consoles. And that's the radio portion. The batteries go in these compartments on either end of the set.
On both ends?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Well, they had to have 3 different batteries?
Actually, this one uses 4. They had something called a D cell, which biased a different stage than the C batteries.
Okay.
But typically, radios of this period use 3 batteries, A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm. So what do we got now, Gary?
Let's take a look at this DeForest Interpanel MR6. You know, DeForest had several companies. He was not a very good businessman, but he made some very interesting radios. It's called an interpanel because the different modules are used. The inner panel with the most modules was the 15 module unit, which is quite expensive and very rare. The part here is the tuner. It uses these duolateral coils.
Oh, wow.
As well as these condensers.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the detector, and it has 2 amplifier modules, audio amplifiers. This detector capacitor or resistor might be of interest to you. You take the cap off and use a lead pencil to draw a mark between the 2 terminals, and the resistance of the graphite there provides the detector resistance.
Did you make the line smaller or wider to get different results, or?
Yes.
Wow.
Smaller, wider, darker. If you look inside, there's not much in there. 3 tubes and 2 tuning condensers.
I see.
So the box had to be this large to accommodate the modules. Okay, here we have 2 passive tuners. The only devices in here are variometers or variocouplers. The variometers, of course, are used for tuning. These are exactly the same, except that this one has an additional tap switch.
Okay.
Here, missing there.
And they're just tuners?
They're just tuners. These would go in front of perhaps an RF amplifier or a detector.
Good.
And these were made by Pennsylvania Wireless in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. And these date to about 1918 or 1919.
Oh, wow. This is before broadcast radio was, so they were pretty much CW.
Yes.
Gary, this is the third room we've gone into, and we're just starting to see your collection, aren't
Okay.
we? Yeah, you got a lot of radios, and they're all beautiful. Tell us about these.
Okay, here we have a receiver pair manufactured by Boston Scale and Machine Company. There were companies in the early 20s, and in fact on into the 30s and even the 40s, that started out manufacturing something other than radios. And the Boston Scale and Machine Company manufactured very accurate and intricate weighing scales. And I've read that they also manufactured machine guns for the Navy during World War I. So this was their entry into radio when the radio boom started in the early 20s. And like many companies of that period, they manufactured just this one model, and for a very short period of time, and that was it. So these Boston Scale and Machine Company radios are very rare. And another fairly rare set is the MAARC double-decker. It's called a double-decker because there are two units, the detector, receiver, and the amplifier, and they're connected together by straps on the side. The different models of the various units could be connected together this way.
Okay, what's this next one here?
The next one is an interesting one. It's a DeForest D17. It's a crystal receiver, crystal detector, and it's reflexed. Reflexing means that the output of the detector is fed back to the RF radio frequency section.
Okay.
So one or two tubes act as both RF amplifiers and audio amplifiers. So that way you achieve the performance of more than the number of tubes. And that, in fact, that was an advertising gimmick they used to get 6-tube performance out of a 4-tube set.
Okay, very cool.
And Ed Lyon did a very interesting article on reflex sets recently, and this is one that he discussed. This one actually has three reflex stages.
And that's unique?
It's unique. I'm not aware of others that use 3 stages of reflexing. It has a crystal detector here, and there were 5 radio frequency transformers supplied with the radio. It uses 3 at a time.
Okay.
So to tune the entire spectrum, you would have to change RF transformers. And to do that, you would have to remove the antenna, lift up the lid, and there's a chart here telling you which transformers to use in which positions to receive that part of the radio spectrum.
Wow. So it wasn't real easy to tune different stations, huh?
Certainly not as easy as a single dial set. And this as well as the DeForest D17 over there, use these DeForest isolan type tubes, type DV2.
Very cool.
You could use a type DV3 as a detector.
Very cool. Is there anything special you wanted to talk about this one? This other DeForest radio here?
Well, It's also a TRF set. It has a built-in loudspeaker. Here's the grill for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're restoring one of these old radios, I guess a purist would always like to use original parts, and that's sometimes difficult. I bought this radio a number of years ago, and the loop was missing this pointer, which shows the position of the loop antenna for best reception, and you could note that in your radio log.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually I found the missing pointer
Oh, wow.
after probably 20 years, but I haven't put it on yet, obviously. One of these early battery sets required a long wire antenna, maybe 80 to 100 feet in length. And if you lived in an apartment, or for some other reason couldn't put up a long wire, you could use a loop antenna.
Mm-hmm.
Some radios came with an integral loop, such as these two DeForest that you see here. So as I was saying, some radios had an integral loop, such as this Priest Straight 8. It's called a Straight 8 because there are 8 tubes in it, although they're not lined up in a straight line, are they? And this is an opera radio. TRF uses 199 tubes, and it has a loop in here which you can store when it's not in use. I'm still looking for additional modules for these little Acme apparatus company units. One's a detector and the other is a audio amplifier. I know there was an RF amplifier and a tuner, but I've never seen them, and I've been to a number of radio flea markets, nor have I seen them on eBay. So if anyone has a module that accompanies those, I'd like to buy it from them. Kind of proud of this Kennedy Model 110 with its companion 525 amplifier. I showed this at the AWA convention this fall, and this is a regenerative set. It's just one tube in the receiver, a 2-stage amplifier. So it won the first place in the regenerative category.
Very cool. And who made that?
Colin B. Kennedy Company.
Interesting.
St. Louis and San Francisco. Now, there's a story behind it. This is a Radiola 20. We're used to seeing the Radiola 20 in the tabletop box about this size.
Mm-hmm.
The Radiola 28 was similar. It had a built-in loop, which plugged in here. There's a hole under this plate. So I think this was a the cabinet for a Radiola 28, and they had some cabinets left over, or for some reason decided to manufacture a 4 model. So they simply covered the hole with that plate and called it a 4 model.
Okay.
This radio belonged initially to the chief engineer at Station WHO in Des Moines, Iowa. His son-in-law was coming to visit family in the Washington area, and he thought he'd have a better chance of selling it here than in Iowa, so he put an ad in the Washington Post, which I saw, and he delivered it to me.
Very cool.
And it plays.
Oh, wow. Even better.
Yes. Okay, up here are 2 versions of the NutraWound. Some people call those the armored breadboard because they're built of metal. And this is the first version manufactured by the Advanced Automobile Accessories Corporation, and with the trade name of NutraWound. And then later on that became the Neutral Wound Radio Corporation.
Huh.
So this is a later version than this.
And why all the dials?
There's a rheostat for each tube in the radio. In the early days of radio, the 20s, volume controls were typically a rheostat in the filament circuit of one or more tubes. And so it varied the voltage on the filament, and that controlled the volume.
Okay.
They didn't know how to manufacture high resistance potentiometers at that time. And by the way, that's why some of these radios have holes in them. There, here. If you would adjust the filament voltage by seeing how bright the filament was burning.
Ah, so you could see the tube and determine how brightly it was
I don't
burning.
know how accurate that was, but that's what they did. Some of the radios, I guess not in this room, actually. Well, yes, the Kennedy. Some have a voltmeter, so you could more accurately set the filament voltage.
And that's what the meters were on these radios. When you see most of them have, that's the filament voltage.
It's filament voltage, yeah.
Okay.
Some also, like the C10 that we saw earlier, there were 2 meters. One was an ammeter,
Okay.
and the other a voltmeter. You know, in restoring these early battery sets, we would like to have them as original as possible. So we look for original parts. Sometimes it's best to leave the radio alone. Don't try to do anything with it if you don't have the original part. And to put some wrong part in there would destroy the originality. That's the case with this American Bosch from 1933. It has unique capacitors, and I don't know if it plays or not. I will not turn it on, and I will leave it in its original, in its current original state. But the Zenith from 1938, I suppose.
So looks like it. Yeah.
I'll restore that. Yeah, I'm not averse to buying a modern radio now and then.
1938.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yes.
So we're going downstairs now, huh, Gary?
Yeah. I
Okay.
have a couple of horns, the Western Electric 518W and the Stromberg Carlson,
Mm-hmm.
and an Apex cone type speaker.
I like those cone speakers. They sound so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, you do have some more radios, Gary.
Yes, a few.
What are these pictures?
Well, those are pictures of where I used to work and a couple of Army pictures.
And where did you work?
I retired from the Department of State.
And what did you do there?
I was an engineer in communications.
Ah, I think the Department of State does a lot of communications, huh?
They do indeed.
And then I just noticed here we got this big tape recorder, and this one here too. And tell me about what are those? I mean, these are not your typical radio components.
Well, I'm an Ampex freak. I used to use a lot of Ampex equipment, maintained it, repaired it. So this AG 440 is one of the models that I used to use.
And what were you using them for?
These were used in our language laboratory at the State Department's Foreign Service
okay.
Institute. We recorded language instruction tapes and distributed them.
And that's what some of these pictures depict, these duplicators?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I see that. Yeah, so they would duplicate these language study tapes and send them all around the world, huh?
Yes, that's correct. As well as use them, of course, in our language laboratories in Washington. May I show you a radio?
Sure.
This is a detector made by Jones Radio on Lexington Street in Baltimore.
Oh,
This is the detector module, and of course there would have been other modules with it, a tuner, perhaps a radio frequency amplifier, and one or more audio amplifiers. This is the only type module I've ever seen. I bought this from a fellow in upstate New York who had it in his collection. He told me for a long time but could not find other modules. I think a fellow who's now deceased, who used to be in our radio club, Emmett Smith, we called him Smitty. I think he had one of these, and I don't know whatever happened to it. But it wouldn't surprise me if one of our club members doesn't have it now. But if anyone else comes across modules for the Jones Radio Manufacturing Company, I would love to buy them from him. I'd like to show you this, which hasn't found a permanent place yet since I brought it back from Charlotte earlier this year. This uses what are called telos, T-E-L-O-S coils, which are these variable radio frequency transformers. You see there's a static part, the stator, and the rotor, and they're all gained together and controlled by this master control. But because it uses National Velvet Vernier controls, each transformer can be varied without affecting the others. So you can touch up the tuning after you've selected a station with the master control.
So this had 4 different tuning dials.
Yes.
And what's unique about these tubes?
These are Kellogg 401 tubes. These tubes were initially developed by the McCulloch Company, and later manufacture was taken over by Kellogg, Kellogg Switchboard and Manufacturing Company. And these are the earliest AC operated tubes. And so in order to use existing 4-pin sockets, the filaments are on the outside, or are brought out to the top and connected there. These are the filament connections. And so only 3 of the 4 pins on the bottom are used. The plate, the grid, and the cathode, since these are indirectly heated tubes.
Very cool.
Now, something I don't understand about this radio, it uses a 171A as the power output tube. Kellogg made a 402 and a 403 power tube, but Stokes, in his book 70 Years of Radio Tubes and Valves, says that the 402 and 403 were never used in commercial receivers. He doesn't explain why, and I've never found out why.
Interesting.
Otherwise. So they chose here to use a 71A power tube. By the way, these Telos RF transformers were invented by a fellow named Jones of Jones Radio Company in Chicago. And he joined up with a fellow named Danziger to form the Danziger-Jones Company, which makes the telemonic receiver. They formed this company, Danziger-Jones, in order to market the Telos coils. I have another couple of radios. I have a Mortimer and an Amsco, which also use the the Telos coils. It's interesting to read the patent application describing these. Let me show you this set. This one, People's Choice at the Antique Wireless Association convention last year. This is a magniformer. Uses coils and transformers in the RF section from RadioArt Laboratories. It uses Ferranti audio transformers and something I don't think I've seen before, a built-in tone filter. A tone filter, for those who may not know, is a device that keeps DC current out of the loudspeaker and provides an inductive load to the final tube.
Okay.
Very good set. It has 9 tubes. One of them can be cut out. It's called the Magniformer 9-8 because there's a switch down there that will cut out one of the tubes if you're listening to a very strong local station.
Okay. And what type of radio is this, Gary?
This is a super heterodyne.
And how did they how did this get around the patent for RCA?
As it was available as a kit or a parts set. That is a set made from parts that you would buy at the radio store using plans published in magazines. For example, Citizens Radio Call Book published a lot of plans for super heterodyne sets. And also RadioArt Laboratories, the makers of the coils, provided full-scale drawings of the panel layout and the sub-panel layout and the wiring diagrams.
So this wasn't a radio that you'd buy in the store. It was, and like the cabinet you made yourself and everything else?
No, this is a standard cabinet. I don't know if this is a Fritz or a Corbett cabinet. They look so much alike. But Fritz and Corbett cabinets with these corners and these feet look very much alike.
Very cool. And the faceplate, it was something you'd buy?
You could buy that pre-drilled with the silk screening here.
Okay.
Or if you wanted, you could buy a blank panel and drill and bore the holes yourself using the plans that were provided by RadioArt Labs.
And that's how they got around the patent for the
Yes.
super heterodynes?
Yes.
Incredible.
RCA attempted to prevent people from building their own sets, but that didn't fly. Now upstairs, we saw the Zenith Super 7 made by the Zenith Radio Corporation. Before it was called Zenith Radio Corporation, it was called Chicago Radio Laboratory, and Zenith was a trade name. So here you see different versions of the Model 1, the Model 3, Model 4, and in a couple of cases there was an early and a late version of those. Apparently a Model 2 was designed but was never built and released. And here we have Zenith, or Chicago Radio Laboratory, amplifiers. The 2-step amplifier on the right and a 3-stage amplifier on the left. Those are fairly rare.
Fairly rare?
Yes.
And they were the precursors to Zenith?
That's correct.
Wow.
Chicago Radio Laboratory. I like this set quite a lot. I like radios that are mechanically interesting. Mechanical parts. Maybe I should have been an ME. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 tune stages, and they're connected by rack and pinion gears.
So they all turn on one dial. Okay.
Yes. And to touch up each one, there's a single plate vernier adjustment.
Oh, let's see that again. Oh, yeah. Like a little tweaker.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, those perform the same function as the trimmers on a modern super heterodyne tuning condenser, tuning capacitor, as some people would say.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
And this is made by Thermoiodine Corporation, Plattsburgh, New York. It's the second radio from the top in the ad over there, TR.
Very cool. I always think it's neat to have the advertisements, which, by the way, that's a little promo for our radio compendium that we have on the members only section of the website. That was
Yes.
that Brian put together all those
Yes.
ads. And
Let's look at a radio that made Atwater Kent change his mind on a model. This is the Western Coil and Electric Company, Racine, Wisconsin. And they use the name Radiodyne, trade name, Radiodyne. And at one point in time, Atwater Kent was using the trade name of Radiodyne on some of his Model 10 receivers. So Western Coil took him to court and he could no longer use Radiodyne.
very cool.
This is an interesting set. It has 6 tubes. In addition to the 3 dials, it has these controls inside, a rheostat and a condenser, which presumably you would adjust these and they would be semi-permanent. So you set them, close the set up, and then do your tuning with the 3 dials here.
Very cool.
It's many radios of the period had a log chart in the lid, and here this guy has received a number of stations from all over the Midwest and the East. Also, at your radio store, you would find log charts or log booklets put out by the battery manufacturers or tube manufacturers, so you could log in your stations, because you see these tuning dials are arbitrarily numbered, usually from 0 to 100. So you need some reference to be able to return to a station. Upstairs you saw the armored breadboard neutral-wounds in the metal configuration. This second knob from the bottom is a neutral-wound all-electric. That's the model number, all-electric. It's an electric set, and strangely enough, it uses UX199 dry cell tubes, 3-volt tubes that were developed for use in portable sets. I don't know why they would not have used O1As in an electric set. The radio below it is a Homewood Pure Tone 6. And those 2 radios are identical except for the escutcheon. The neutral wound was made in Homewood, Illinois, and the Homewood was also made in Homewood, Illinois. So there was definitely a relationship there, but I've never learned what it was. Okay, here we have a stack of radios. The bottom one is called the Hotspot 14, and that's a 14-tube super heterodyne set.
14 tubes.
14 tubes.
Wow.
It uses what were called essential parts that were made by the Robertson Davis Company. Several of these manufacturers, primarily of super heterodyne sets, would sell what they call the essential parts, which is essentially the RF section of a radio, and then you would install or build whatever audio section you wanted for the rest of it.
Okay.
So you would buy the Robertson Davis essential parts to build the Hotspot 14.
Mm-hmm.
They also came out with another radio that had 11 tubes in it. And that was called a Super Looper 11.
The Super Looper?
Super Looper 11. This is another super heterodyne, but it doesn't have the what we might call the standard super heterodyne circuit in the front end. And the inventor of that,
The strobodyne? Is that what it's called?
strobodyne,
Okay.
he described the circuit in terms of the action of a stroboscope, which to me didn't make a lot of sense. And different people that have seen the radio and the schematic have had different opinions on what type of circuit it is, but it is super heterodyne.
Mm-hmm.
Top one is a TRF made by Jewett Phonograph and Radio Company in Pontiac, Michigan.
Look at that dial. I think it's gold. What do you think?
It is, and this is a little, there's a light bulb behind this which lights up when it's on. This is a Northland radio made in Minneapolis, Minnesota. A very good player. Notice the N in the grill for Northland.
Mm-hmm.
I mention this out of respect for Brian.
Why is that? Because he's from Michigan?
He's from Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Here we have a Gilfillan GN2. If you open this door, looks like a standard 3-dial, which it is. But over here, on this door, we have the volume controls, power switch, and a voltmeter. I mentioned upstairs that some radios have a voltmeter to aid in adjusting the filament voltage. This is one of them.
That's for volume control?
Yes.
Okay.
And over here we have the tuning chart, and in a nice little pocket, the operating instructions.
Very cool.
In the early days, it was sometimes necessary, especially on those radios with many, many knobs and controls. It was necessary to have an operating instructions booklet. I mentioned earlier that some companies who did things quite different from radio manufacturing decided to get on the bandwagon during the height of radio manufacturing activity in the 20s, and this is one of them. Niacoflex stands for New York Album and Card Company. So they made, I suppose, picture albums and Christmas cards, and then said, let's make a radio.
How long do you think they were in business?
A few weeks, maybe, I'm not sure.
So this is a pretty rare radio.
There is another one of these on eBay right now.
Really?
I saw it last night. It was made for the Hanson Storage Company in Wisconsin. It was made not by Hanson, but by the Guthrie Company for them. And this is the Nightingale model.
Why would a storage company want to have a radio manufactured for them?
I thought maybe you could answer that. I don't know.
Do you think they use it as a PR?
It could be. I don't know. But they had other models that also used the names of birds.
Huh,
So this
interesting.
is the Nightingale. I don't recall the names of the others. And here's another super heterodyne. This is called the Receptrad. And it has six filament control rheostats for the 6 tubes in there.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it has 8 tubes, so one of the rheostats would control 2 tubes. Take a look at this Madison Moore, which is another super heterodyne set, which I showed at the AWA convention in 2019, just before they closed down for the COVID outbreak.
And what was unique about this one? Was this another kit?
Yes.
And what were you said something earlier about 3 different kinds of kits.
Well, These sets that were not manufactured, that is, they did not come out of a manufacturing facility, but were built by individuals or people called set builders. You could go to a set builder and have him build a set for you if you didn't feel competent to do it yourself. And in my opinion, there are 2 or 3 different variations of homebrews. A homebrew to me is a radio that a guy designs and builds at his kitchen table.
Mm-hmm.
There are kit sets where a company such as Madison Moore or Radiart Laboratories would sell you a kit of parts and give you full-scale drawings, dimensioned drawings of the front panel and the sub-panel, parts layout, schematic, and all you would need to do is connect it up. Even the holes would be, well, you could buy the panel with the holes already made in the front panel, or you could drill those yourself in a blank panel. And that's about it.
Weren't there some kits that were like, here are all the parts and you build it yourself?
Yes, there were. And, you know, maybe there's a fine distinction between the 3, but that's how I think of them. Let me mention this. I don't know who made this, but I've seen 2 other sets like this, and one of them said Chesco, C-H-E-S-C-O, and it came from a fellow in Delaware whose his son-in-law was selling it for him after he passed away. It said Chesco, and I assumed that had something to do with the Chesapeake Bay. And I bought this from Emmett Smith, who lived in Baltimore. So, were these made in Baltimore? I don't know. Who made them? I don't know. But there is a club member who has these two panels on one panel in a box. And it says, there's a metal tag saying it was manufactured by Price Brothers in Frederick, Maryland. A relationship between them, maybe these were made in Frederick, and there's the association with the Chesapeake Bay.
So this is we're very much assured that this is a radio that came out of the Delmarva area, Delaware and or Maryland, but we don't know exactly who made it.
That's correct. This is starting in. Upstairs we saw a DeForest inner panel with 4 panels, the MR6, and this one is a 3-panel set that was listed in the same DeForest catalog D, I believe it was. It's called Beginner's Unit Set, and it's a crystal receiver intended primarily for CW, but it does work on the broadcast band audio.
It has no tubes.
No, just the crystal.
Mm-hmm. And that's what kind of tuner is this? Or is that a tuner?
That's down here.
Oh, that's down there. No, the induct. This is an inductive coil.
Yeah, the inductor works with the condenser down here. This is one more. Frankly speaking, I don't know. I don't remember if this is I believe this is a TRF. What's unique about it is it has these radio frequency coils, transformers, in the back, which are in evacuated glass bulbs.
Oh, I see them. Yeah.
And those are called dehydrated coils, made by St. James.
Wow. And that's who, was this a kit as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's described in Citizens Radio Call Book from, I believe, 1926 or 27. The one beside the DeForest is an evil radio. It's got the Nazi swastikas on either side of the dial. This is called a Volksempfänger, people's receiver. Very, very inexpensive and poorly made and poorly designed radios. They were, I believe, all of them. There were different models. Over here's another, the Deutsche Kleinempfänger, German small receiver. But those were regenerative sets, you know. We stopped making regenerative sets in the early 20s. But, you know, they made them cheap.
Did they give these away to the people?
Oh, no, they purchased them.